Hey, you. So, good to see you first off, and second off, I'm going to be comparing two different types of paper. My other half came back with this brand called Be Inspired, and I thought that I would share my first time using it with you as I contrasted it against another style of paper. Oh, here's a quick screenshot from the Walmart webpage. Yes, I'm a Walmart girl. And that gives you all the information about it. But when I opened it up and I felt it, it felt a lot like this brand here on the right, which is the Canson XL. And I thought that I would also throw a screenshot up on it so that you could have an idea of how much these guys cost and contrast and all that stuff. So I am showing off an old familiar friend right here. I start off my paintings with my Winsor & Newton palette. I have used Winsor & Newton longer than any other paints that are out there. When I oil painted, I used Winsor & Newton, and when I made the switch to watercolor, their watercolors were the watercolors that I made the transition to. They are my old familiar friends, and I've had that white palette so long, I don't think any of the paints are original to the paints that came with the palette. I've just been refitting it as colors get low with new paints, which is a fun thing you can do with watercolors. Okay, so I'm going to be doing two paintings of yellow submarines. Yes, I was inspired by the Beatles song. Even though I have done other yellow submarines in my life, because I like the color combination of the blue and the yellow together, that isn't why I chose to do it. I was listening to the Beatles earlier to the day I painted this, so that's the inspiration behind them. This first painting is on the Canson XL, and I'm pretty familiar with it. One thing that I like about this paper is that it doesn't warp terribly bad with watercolor, and another thing that it does not do is it doesn't take watercolor, I don't know how to say it, sporadically. It's consistent. I've had other brands of paper where it absorbs the pigment at different rates, and so you'd have like little splotches of dark pigmentation in the middle of a flat wash, and it would drive me crazy. And I've never had the Canson XL do that to me, and so I am grateful for that. Before I start going silent, I am going to give you a heads up. I'm going to try to not talk the whole time and only talk when I have specific things to talk about. Like the fact that in both of these paintings, I did my best to use the same colors. I messed up a little bit when I get to the trim detail work. One of them's definitely oranger, one of them's definitely redder. But I used the same pigments on both paintings so that we could really see how both of these paintings work on the different types of paper. By this point in this painting, I can already tell a few things about the bee paper. One is that it's behaving similarly to the Canson XL because it isn't working. That's a lot of watercolor and pigment and water that's going on this paper, and there is minimal buckling, and so that is something that I am enjoying right off the top. Another thing that I'm enjoying is that the pigments aren't being absorbed at an erratic rate. That shot there with the two paintings side by side, I could already tell that the bee-inspired paper was doing something slightly different with the pigment than the Canson, and the paint looked more vibrant on it, and that was really quite a surprise. I didn't know that paper would make a difference. You can see it more in real life, but you can still, if you're paying attention, see the difference on the papers when they're side by side. Oh, so this is actually not from my Winsor Newton palette. This is from a Kuretake palette. You see it over on the right. This is the color I bought that palette to get a hold of. When I bought it, there is a whole bunch of people talking about how it was the best bang for your buck and it was a great beginner palette. I struggle with it. I almost every single time I paint with it, make it go shiny. When you super saturate watercolors, you can actually make them go shiny. And I do it pretty much every single time I use the Kuretake paints. But I don't have that color in any of my other palettes. So I had to bring it out because they look so good with that cobalt and that mica color. Oh, it makes my heart happy. And surprisingly enough, I actually make my Winsor Newton go shiny in this paper. And looking back on it, as being it's the first time I've ever done it, I wonder if it is something to do with the bee paper. I will have to do more paintings and come back to you on that. But I actually made the Winsor Newtons go shiny on the bee paper. So I am going in with the Naples yellow, and I noticed that it really applied quite lovely on both of them. I think that I got really beautiful washes on both of the papers. And I think that it has something to do with the pigment. And if my current direction of paint that I was going was watercolor, I might try looking in and finding out why the Naples yellow was so much easier to get a flat wash with than, say, the cobalt blue. But I'm not going to. If any of y'all you can definitely write me a note in the comments. I'm not sure if it's this painting or not. Okay, so this is the thing you can do in watercolors where you paint in an area that isn't next to another area that's damp, and that will prevent the watercolor from migrating from one area to another. They also talk about it as bleeding, but really it's just the pigment following the water that is on your paper when it happens. And I am getting ready, I think. Oh, yeah. I get really brave. I think that there's been some edits and that there's been more time that you don't get to see in the final edited copy. And I have some pretty big, fat, bold line work. But looking back at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that those two that the paint didn't migrate from one area to another. It's an awful risky proposition if what only you saw on screen was what I actually did, if that makes sense. So on the Canson, the orange is a little bit oranger. I accidentally make this red color redder on the other piece of paper. I am going in and I'm shadowing with the Naples yellow that I have added some burnt sienna to. And I think that it makes for a really nice color in contrast, or, for shadowing. Okay, so this is something that I don't normally do. You see that piece of paper? That is so that my hand doesn't have to touch the paper that has the watercolor on it. I'm not sure if there's, I don't know what was going on. I might be just used to what gouache feels like underneath my hand, but every time I rested my hand on the paper, it felt so gross that I had to get a piece of paper to keep my hand to the point where it wouldn't touch the paper. It felt kind of sticky, but not. And I don't even know how to explain it. It felt very different that night than how gouache feels. And I sneak a little gouache into this painting. Even though I have white watercolor, I have not found a water-soluble paint that is opaque as this Holbein white gouache. And since I really thought that some nice, shiny, bright highlights would really make this painting pop in the way I was looking for it, I totally went and fished it out of my other work bucket. And after I go through and I do the shadowing with the reds and do the highlights, I'm gonna bust out with a dip pen. I don't know why that was so hard for my brain to come up with that one. I use a dip pen and I do little rivets along all of the little borders, and then I do some visual. Oh, I forgot about the shadowing. Yeah. And then I do some visual texturing on it. And it is a technique that I discovered while using some opaque watercolors because I didn't have the steady enough hand to keep my hand from going over my line work. That I found that I needed to re-blacken areas up, and I came across the dip pen. And with the opaque watercolors, I had to clean the dip pen after every so often, but it didn't kill the dip pen like it did Microns and several other brands of pens that I tried to go and fix my line work. And so when I started thinking that I needed to add some visual texture to these pieces, that even with the bubbles they were a little bit too plain, I went for my dip pen and was pleasantly surprised. These colors that are not proclaiming to be opaque watercolors really took the ink nib quite well, and I didn't have to clean it at all, which was a pleasant surprise. And there's that one finished. All right, I'm gonna throw up an image from. I forgot. What? I completely forgot that I do the same thing. I do the rivets and I add a little bit more visual texture by throwing some additional line work in there. I was so focused on talking about the end of the video where I have both of the paintings up side by side that you can see what they looked like together. Now there's that one finished. And and then the next thing that's gonna happen is the two paintings side by side. So you can really get a feel for how the bee paper is just inherently a little bit more vibrant, but that they're both good papers. I recommend either one. I am totally gonna play some more with the bee paper. I might have a new multimedia sketchbook that's my new friend. Right, till next time, friends. Leave a comment, hit subscribe, like me. Till next time, I love you. Bye.